and I'm sure you're going to enjoy his presentation. So please give a warm welcome to Mr. Mark William Buttler.
Hi everybody. Just on cue, my musical accompaniment has started. I have two pieces for you. One of them is kind of serious, a short story. The other one's kind of not. It's an essay. And as John said, the first one, I was very fortunate to have had it been published in two online literary journals or publications. The first one is Bright Flash 1000. The second one is called Short Edition. And like John said, they came up with this idea to distribute the stories through short story dispensers that are all over the world. One of the main supporters of this, both financially and spiritually, is the movie director Francis Ford Coppola. And so they have their literally vending machines in colleges, airports, anywhere where people have a little time to kill and want to read, you know. And I actually, yes, as John said, 7 different countries, 46 different dispensers, including, of course, United States, Canada, UK, France, India, the Netherlands, and Taiwan. So I am international. The story is called Waiting for Another Train. There he was, waiting for another train. He was so sick of the subways, always late, dirty, noisy, flying maniac kids dancing for dollars, bad musicians, endless panhandlers, and the so-called announcements, a muddled, mumbling mess. He stood close to the edge of the platform, not very smart. People got pushed onto the tracks. It was happening a lot lately. But all he could think of was his current go-to word, whatever. It was a good word. It covered everything. It was his birthday, so he was thinking about his life, of course, such as it was. Things were going nowhere. There was nowhere to go, nothing to do. There were no new plans, no new strategy. It had stopped dead, the big dream. He was awake now. Yesterday had been the last straw. It wasn't going to happen. And now he didn't know what to do, who to be. So he stood on the edge of the platform, clutching his crumpled paper bag, which contained a can of beer. Why did he even bother with the paper bag? Who the hell cared? Once he saw someone rolling a joint on the A train. Another time he caught a glimpse of a crack pipe party on the M60 bus. So what was he, really? Nothing but a throwback. An old guy and his beer, hidden in a paper bag. Who the hell cared? He took a swig and waited for the train. And then he heard her, behind him and to the left. She was on her phone. Hello? Her voice collapsed into a halting sob. The worst thing that could have happened had apparently just happened. He turned to look. Her face was melting. Tears streamed down her cheeks. A man to her left glanced, then went back to his phone. The woman to her right moved away. The rest of the crowd stayed in their bubbles and waited for the scene to end. Don't look. Don't react. Besides, every street show in New York was open to interpretation. Was it real? Was she real? Was she nuts? Was it a put-on? Performance art? Drunk? Drugs? Most of the crowd usually chose not to be part of the audience. It was a tough room. But he knew it was real, somehow. He looked, and then he found he couldn't avert his eyes. He witnessed her breakdown, her collapse, her tears. Then suddenly a train was there. It was hers, but not his. The doors opened and she stumbled on, crying uncontrollably. He stood there, and then suddenly he felt something. Sorrow, heartache, pity for someone besides himself. He had to catch his breath. He stared as she took a seat on the train. He knew he shouldn't, but he did. Suddenly he felt compelled to do something for her. But what? There was nothing he could do. He was a stranger. She was a stranger, and that's another thing he thought. Why should I care? I've got problems of my own. I can't even help myself. But he sensed her desperation and somehow felt desperate himself. He wanted to help her, but how? He kept looking at her, hoping she would look back. But what if she did? What then? A smile? A thumbs up? Pathetic. Should he get on her train? His mind raced. To do what? This is crazy. He took a step, but the doors were closing. It was too late. He kept his eyes on her, watching her through the window, and suddenly, without realizing, he had put his hands together as if to pray. He was shocked. What was this? He didn't pray. But maybe she would see it, the gesture. Maybe it would mean something. He kept looking at her, but she didn't look back. And then, just like that, she was rolling away, then gone, leaving him standing there with his prayer and his beer, waiting for another train. Thank you. Thank you very much. This one's a little lighter. It's an essay I wrote a while back. It's called I Saw Mickey Mouse in His Underwear. I just saw Mickey Mouse in his underwear. Really. I got off the N train at 49th and Broadway, and I saw this guy putting on his Mickey Mouse mascot costume in the stairwell, so he could walk around Times Square and wave and greet all the little kids, pose for some snapshots, and then maybe point the parents to the Disney store, where the tourist tykes could beg mommy and daddy to buy them the t-shirts and toys and other Disney swag that they could buy online just as easily, but didn't, because this was different. This was a souvenir from New York City. And why buy something anywhere else in the world when you could say you bought the same exact thing in New York City for more money? Oh, and don't forget Mickey's tip, which better be good, or you may see a cranky side of the old Mickster that you never imagined was there. And I'm pretty sure that those parents won't have any idea that this counterfeit king of cartoon Americana, who little Junior would soon be hugging, was standing in a dirty subway stairwell in his tighty whities about 5 minutes ago. But hey, that's showbiz. And they also have no idea that the furry, freaky red monster amusing their kids might soon find himself under arrest. That's right, I'm talking about Elmo. Yes, I know the criminal history of the Elmo character in general has been well documented, but that's another story. I'm talking about the Elmo I saw in handcuffs on 50th and Broadway. The guy standing there in his grungy red suit, surrounded by 4 cops. 4 cops! Oh, mercy, what on earth could it be? Peddling drugs, drunk and disorderly? Happy hands on a housewife from Des Moines? I had to find out, so I made my way through the crowd. Yes, the collared Elmo was an instant tourist attraction, and asked one of the cops, "What did Elmo do?" The cop gave me a weary answer. "These guys are always fighting each other," he said. What? These guys? Then I realized he was talking about the mascots, all of them. The Mickeys and Elmos and Spider-Mans and Batmans and Buzz Lightyears and Woody Woodpeckers and Betty Boops and even Winnie the Pooh. What? Winnie the Pooh? Say it ain't so. So just what was going on here? These unlicensed pop culture hustlers fought each other? Why? Did they battle over turf, argue over customers? What exactly was Elmo's problem? Did Mr. Peanut hit on his woman? Did Olaf pick his pocket? Did SpongeBob grab his ass? It got me to thinking, how does all of this work? Is there some kind of an organization, some kind of a mascot community? Do they meet to agree on a schedule and divvy up territory? Have they ever thought of unionizing? Or is every Elmo a freelancer and every Mickey a mercenary? Do they know each other personally? Socialize? Have a few beers at the end of the day? Now that's a happy hour I'd like to see. I doubt I'll ever find out, because for whatever reason, I don't have the urge to do a behind-the-scenes story on these shabby renegade replicas. I'm just not feeling a cutting-edge Papa Smurf expose in my bones. But to be honest, times are tough, and it can't be an easy job wearing those suffocating costumes in the middle of summer, angling for scraps from an endless wave of anxious parents and sugar-charged kids who don't really care if you can't breathe under that giant head, or have an itch you can't scratch with those puffed-up 4-fingered mouse mitts. And it can't be easy to stand in your skivvies in public to get dressed up as a 6-foot rodent. So that's something to keep in mind if you're in a subway station and happen to see Mickey Mouse in his underwear. But then again, doesn't Disney sell underwear? My immodest Mickey just might be onto something. Suddenly I imagine myself buying some knockoff Donald Duck boxer shorts and getting on out there. Hey, it worked for the naked cowboy. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Mark Buttler, everyone. Please give a round of applause. As I mentioned earlier, I've got copies of my novel, Worlds, for sale here. And Worlds focuses on 4 different characters. There's Seamus Logan, who you heard me read about earlier. The second character is Sarsfield, the Jesuit priest. The third one is named Janie Doherty Logan, who married into the family. And the fourth one is Paul Logan. I'd like to read a short piece about Janie here. As I said, this is set in Philadelphia in the early 60s. Janie is working at the Logan Construction Company, and she is having an affair with her boss, who's engaged. And her boyfriend, the boss, has disappeared and not told her where he was going. In a day's time, we went from seeing each other every day and having surreptitious lunches together 3 times a week to having no contact at all. There was that one dark period, those awful days, weeks they seemed like, and perhaps were. What started it? One lunchtime I wandered down into the gray, wide lower church of St. John the Evangelist to make a visit. I saw people in line for confession and joined them. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's only been a few days since my last confession. You see, I usually go to St. Francis de Sales on Saturdays. Why did you come here? I heard a call. Then I poured out the story to him, that he was my boss, that he was engaged, that I loved him, and that he had gone away without a word. I was hardly interested in his advice or in any penance. It was just this outpouring that I needed. I think he told me to pray and have patience, not to encourage the man to be dishonest, but to allow him to make his decision. I don't recall exactly. I do remember kneeling and saying some prayers for a while, the smell of the stale incense an appropriate match for my foggy mind. It seemed that the talk in the office had gotten to James. It was not the same chatter that tormented me from the secretaries and the sniggering mailroom guys. He wasn't privy to that, thank God. It was the executive gossip that bothered him. His brother came to him and asked him about the rumors. He said he had overheard some remarks in the locker room after handball, and he wanted to know if they were true. He told his brother half the truth. He said we had run into each other by chance at the automat, and that we had lunched together a few times, and that we were friends and nothing more. And this lying seemed to be what really bothered him. He's such an honest guy. He mentioned that he had found himself lying to people close to him, not only his fiancée, but his family and friends as well, and that the guilt had really begun to trouble him. Oh, but so much of this is guesswork. When he disappeared, I racked my brain to find things to try to think of reasons for his departure. For days, I went over every scrap of conversation I could remember, but to be more accurate, it was nights. I spent night after night playing and replaying the scenes in my mind until I could come up with a couple of reasonable explanations, those I described above. Because when it happened, it seemed to make no sense. It was so sudden, so cold, that it hurt, especially during those first few days, worse than anything I'd experienced. I suppose I'd been in love before, but I never felt anything this powerful, this painful. Indeed, the power of my love for him truly made itself known through this pain. In those dark days, I was unable to eat or sleep. Music seemed to help, or make things worse, I'm not sure which. But there were many hours in which I just needed to listen to music. I'd fall asleep in my chair with the radio on and wake up with a sore neck in the middle of the night, the national anthem often calling me to this strange attention. On other mornings, I would wake up in bed before my alarm, and as quickly as I would realize that I was in my own red room, the painful situation that had kept me from sleep would come back to my mind. And the blood would stop flowing in my veins. The scenes would start flashing through my mind again, and I would not be able to get back to sleep. This even happened on Saturday and Sunday, which made my mother start to question me. She knew that I liked to sleep in on weekends, and yet there I was in the kitchen before she was, making a cup of tea with dark circles under my eyes, rubbing my sore neck. The day that I found out was the worst. I walked by his office several times, did not see him. There were no signs of his briefcase or overcoat either. I was dying to ask his secretary Miss Hauser if he was ill, but I didn't dare. Much as I tried to hide it, I'm sure she saw the longing, curious look in my eyes as I passed. But with sheer feminine spite and executive secretary condescension, Miss Hauser just stared at me with a cold smile, the cat who had eaten the canary. She refused to breathe a word to ease my anxiety. I am almost certain that she would not have told me where Mr. Logan was, even if I had asked her in front of a group of clients. No, she seemed to enjoy my plight and her power to prolong it. Later, I overheard some girls in the bathroom. One said she thought James was sick. The other said he was fine, but he had gone upstate for business. To Scranton, she thought. And they wouldn't be back for a week. I felt like they were looking at me to see how I reacted, but I would not give them the satisfaction. I just kept fixing my mascara, picturing a barren land with its nature ripped off to expose the bare earth, and hoping the tears were not welling too obviously in my eyes. I went back to my desk and pretended to be working. I looked at some forms and tried to type a letter, but the characters grew blurry. I knew I was making mistakes. Still, I typed on. I did not want the girls to see me wiping tears from my eyes. Trying to seem natural, I made a few corrections with liquid paper. But before long, the letter was too full of errors to be salvaged. I kept typing anyway. They were not going to see me ripping the Logan letterhead out of the typewriter and throwing it away. The words were so blurred that I couldn't even read. By the end, all I was typing was, "Why did you leave without telling me? Why did you leave without telling me? Why did you leave without telling me? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me?" Thank you. As some of you know, one of the plays I've written is called Sons of Molly McGuire, about the Molly McGuires in upstate Pennsylvania. And our next speaker has written probably the best book about the Molly McGuires, called The Sons of Molly McGuire. He's got a new book called Ambush in Central Park, about the only IRA operation to ever take place on American soil. So please give a warm welcome to Mr. Mark Bullock.
Thank you, John. If you're wondering what somebody with a last name like Bullock is, why they're interested in Irish history, my mother came from a huge clan of Irish coal miners in Pennsylvania. My grandfather O'Connor went to work in the mines when he was 12, and they lived in the township where the Molly McGuire troubles got started in Pennsylvania. So I got interested in the subject of Irish rebels in America, and that's the subject of this new book. It's about a squad from the Cork Brigade of the IRA back during the War for Independence, who came to New York to track down an informer who had gotten many IRA men killed in Cork when he turned informer. So this is from chapter 1. The book's, yes, as John mentioned, the book is called Ambush at Central Park, When the IRA Came to New York. And it'll be out in the spring from Fordham University Press. So, chapter 1, The Ambush. When the relentless avengers of the Irish Republican Army finally caught up with Cruxy O'Connor in Manhattan that fine spring evening, they sent 6 bullets his way, one for each man the informer had sent to an early grave the year before. 4 of the gunshots found their target, and as a cop reached the crumpled victim on the steps of a finishing school at 84th and Central Park West, O'Connor was clutching a revolver with a spent shell in each chamber. After one of his attackers dropped the gun, the fallen O'Connor had grabbed it, intending to defend himself. But the weapon was useless by then. His assailant had emptied the revolver at him. O'Connor hadn't had much luck in the weapons department lately. There was that machine gun they had given him for the ambush the year before. When he told them that it jammed just as the shooting started, the boys started looking at him funny. Not long after that, he'd made the mistake of taking a pistol to Sunday Mass. The coppers threw a cordon around the church, and oh dear God, what a massacre that led to. 6 men dead, including Willie Deasy, his next door neighbor, just 20 years old. Pa Murray and the boys blamed them. They had stalked O'Connor through 3 countries. He'd barely escaped with his life when they tried to poison him. and he'd had to quit his job